Welcome back to the Photo Banter podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gagne, and on today's podcast, I speak with photographer Jared Soares. Jared has worked with clients such as Apple, Nike, Time Magazine, and Wired, to name a few. In this interview, I speak to Jared about starting out working as a newspaper photographer, transitioning to freelancing full-time, and I also speak to Jared about a recent test shoot and how he approaches working with the team. I've been following Jared's work for a while, so I was excited to get him on the podcast to hear about his journey with photography. So I hope you enjoy, and thanks so much for listening. All right, well, Jared Soares, welcome to the podcast, man. Excited to have you on. I've been seeing your work around for years, and glad my friend Hanad, who we were talking about before this, was posting your work, this recent project you did. I think it was like a test shoot. So I was excited to get you on the podcast, kind of hear more about it. I was just kind of curious. You did this kind of recent test shoot, I think in the last few months, where it was a bunch of like kind of tennis theme a little bit. What was kind of the backstory on that shoot for you?
The backstory with this like test shoot, and my agent actually kind of doesn't want me to call it a test shoot. It's the first test shoot that I've done that I've like felt like confident about in terms of showing. But the whole foundation of it was like I want to start collaborating with stylists, with makeup artists. I want to take better care in terms of like finding a location, just trying to have more control, have more of a vision, in terms of what a project like this could look like, and like bringing more people, assembling a team, working directly with a retoucher, for that extra like bit to kind of get the images to really, really sing. It's something that I haven't done before. It's a little out of my comfort zone.
Yeah.
So the fact that this one, came through, I was really excited about it. It's definitely like a team effort all around.
Yeah, it seemed like really a little bit different than a lot of your work. It looks more like kind of documentary based, more kind of a photojournalistic feel sometimes. So how was it kind of working on this project where, I mean, as you know, a lot of times, like being like a photojournalist or editorial photographer, a lot of times I'm sure it's just you kind of out there. A lot of times just maybe one assistant if you're lucky. But with this, you're working with retoucher, assistants, and stylists. How's kind of that process for you?
It was all pretty new, but it was some of it was familiar. Occasionally on like bigger commercial jobs, there will be like a wardrobe stylist, makeup artist. Even for some editorial, like we'll have a makeup artist and of course assistants. But what was really like fun was Danielle Wood, the stylist. We were kind of going back and forth about like, okay, what's the theme? What's the concept? How can we introduce some wardrobe and like certain color palettes? And how can we find talent that's where like everything's gonna kind of come together, like the talent, the wardrobe, the location. How can we get all of those things to connect and like sing? And then once we get everybody there on shoot day, like that's kind of the fun part. That's like the party. That's where you get to like
Yeah.
everybody gets to have fun, everybody gets to express themselves. But it's kind of the build up where it's like, okay, like do we like these pair of shoes with like this accessory? What about this vantage point for like the location? So these are conversations that like I'm not really having that regularly. So it was really enjoyable to be a part of the process, and it only just made me want to do kind of more of these like types of projects where there's like more collaboration involved.
No, it came out really great. Like, and what was kind of the process of like finding the location. You obviously had some really good talent. I don't know if they're professional models. They definitely looked like it. When it's a shoot, you're just kind of funding yourself. Like, how did the kind of logistics of like finding a location, finding the talent, how did that kind of all come together?
So I got to go back to kind of like team effort. Danielle and I had gone back and forth with some like different locations. The main thing was like trying to tie the location into the wardrobe and also kind of say like, okay, this is more like sporty, athletic. Like we kind of want to allude to tennis, but like, we don't want like people hanging around by a net or like a chair umpires area. Like that would just be like a little too on the nose. But we also wanted to highlight the wardrobe and like, off the court type of vibe. So we had just kind of like sent some stuff back and forth over email, over text. And then I think it was actually one of Danielle's colleagues, Julieta, who's another amazing prop stylist in Baltimore, DC area. She had kind of like texted Danielle and was like, hey, this like location, this could kind of work what you guys are into. And then I had actually had a shoot at this place, like a few weeks ago. So I was like familiar with it, but like wasn't looking at it, through the eyes of like, okay, this could like work for like a, quote unquote test shoot. I was more like, okay, like, how do I make this background not stuck?
I loved it because it had so many different looks. Like it had like a lot of greenery. Then sometimes there's like you could see some of the ground. It was like very, very unique to what it was, I think. But
Thanks,
yeah, and like how is that process of like work handing your photos off to a retoucher? Because obviously I'm sure like as an editorial photographer, when you're shooting for Time or whatever, Bloomberg, most of the time there's no budget for retouching. It's just you're doing your own thing probably most of the time. How's that kind of collaboration working with like a professional retoucher and kind of passing your images down the line, I guess?
So again, like my goal is to make myself uncomfortable this year. And a lot of like with the editorial work, the timeline is just so quick that trying to, work in like a retoucher and like their process and their timeline is just like not possible.
Yeah.
Even for like, bigger stories, like the timeline is still like pretty quick.
Yeah.
So the idea of like sending my images off and then like having a quick dialogue or chat about like, what I'm thinking, and then like having to wait like 3 days or 4 days or even a week was kind of an adjustment.
Yeah.
But it's been, I don't know. I feel like I'm like the person that uses like 1% of like Photoshop for a capture one, or not even 1%. And then like Lena is like showing me stuff and I'm just like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
This is insane. Like, I didn't even notice this. I didn't know that you could do this or this was possible. And I'm sure that like what she's doing is just like real like base level like retouching. It's just like I'm not used to it quite yet. So like it's all pretty exciting. And again, like the idea of collaboration and like working with somebody to help you, realize like, your vision or like what you want something to look like, and like them helping you get there and then making it better. All of that's like, I would say like the test shoot has been like the biggest realization of like bringing in like a wardrobe stylist, bringing in a retoucher, having a makeup artist, all of that whole team aspect and having these like conversations has been like super exciting. It's like something that like I'm real fired up to try to do in like, the next year.
Yeah, man, it helps elevate it. Like you said, like I'm the same way. Like I probably know like 1% of what Photoshop can actually do. And it's something I've been trying to do more recently too. I've been working with some retouchers because it's like, I don't know, I just got in the habit of being like, oh, I'm a one-man band, I can do everything, I'll figure it out, I'll YouTube it, which is good. But then it's like really, I came like the realization, like, oh no, like if I work with people that have like a unique skill and they're good at this, I have my skill set is this, and it's like like you said, when it all comes together, it kind of just helps elevate what you're doing, which is exciting. Um, and then I guess in terms of like, what were you hoping to do with that shoot? Is it kind of, did you have like a client in mind that you're trying to hopefully market that towards, or is it really just something you're trying to play with in terms of imagery, I guess?
A little bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Danielle and I, like, first and foremost, we wanted to like make something, that we were proud of. Wanted to make something that like, um, we wanted to put out in the world that like we would be psyched about. Because like I've definitely done test shoots that weren't as produced, and I've been kind of like, all right, this is fine. Don't
Yeah.
know if I want to show it. Like, why did I do this? This was like not the case. This was more like, okay, it's like everybody working together, um, for this like kind of common goal. Yeah, and if you can kind of like notice that like there's a specific brand, that we're like looking at if you kind of pay attention to the images.
Okay.
Um, so part of it is like targeting. I think like we'll both like reach out to certain places, with like PDFs or like direct email, and like I know that like our agents are fired up about it, so they'll use that in like marketing. I think also like the thing that I'm interested in is like kind of like positioning, like, and I feel like if you, it's kind of that old adage of like show the work that you want to get hired for.
Yep.
So I'm at this stage. I want to do more of these types of like shoots. It would be very nice if like a brand or like an agency was like, oh yeah, we liked what you did for that project that you did on your own. Like, why don't you do that? Like, same crew for this thing that like aligns with that like some aesthetic.
Mm.
So that's kind of yeah, that's like the other like kind of angle that I was like hoping for this.
I like it, man. Yo, that Wilson campaign, it's coming, baby.
Yeah.
uh, one thing I've been asking everybody, because obviously the last 2 years with the pandemic's been crazy. Like, how have you had to, like, if you have had to change the way you kind of market your business? Because this is something I've struggled with. Because I know for years a lot of the way I would get work is go meet with editors in their offices or art producers and agencies or whatever, and kind of get that FaceTime. And now it's like, obviously most people are still not even working in their offices. Like, how have you kind of been able to maintain and keep the work coming in and market yourself during these last kind of crazy 2 years?
That's a good question. Yeah, it's been a challenge. I've always liked going in for like meetings in person. New York is like a quick train ride away.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a lot of editors and publications that I work with in DC, so hitting somebody up for lunch meeting or like drinks is like was pretty standard. And
Yeah.
then like starting to go out to like LA and like Portland and San Francisco is always exciting. But then like, yeah, COVID hit, and all the marketing that I do now is like all just through, I'll send a newsletter maybe like a couple times a year, and then
Mm.
just like Instagram,
Yeah.
which is like weird to say out loud, but like, yeah, like Instagram, like trying to be pretty intentional in terms of like what I'm like sharing. Um, then also to backtrack, not be like that precious about it.
Mm-hmm.
And also to try to not be that serious. Cause like I always like feel with like the nice thing about an in-person meeting is that like um your tone of voice, your interests, the way that you dress, like the affects in your voice, and like you can kind of convey how you feel excited or enthusiastic, and like you can share like what your taste is, like pretty easy. It's easier to do in person.
Oh yeah.
But like you can't really, it's much more difficult, or it's much more difficult for me, I feel like, to do that online. So that's where, like, if you have followed me, like you might see some just real weird and random stuff on like my IG story.
Yeah.
In addition to, some of the serious work, and then some of like, comments about like the industry and like trying to help people. Like I want to, yeah, you get like Monster Energy drink 311, but then you're also getting like, some like very concerned, serious editorial work, some
Yeah.
produced commercial work, and then like, okay, like how do I give back? How do I help like, the next person behind me come up and like try to make their path a little bit easier. So like I want to be able to like show that. Don't know if it's successful, but like, yeah, that's kind of like where my marketing is. Everything's digital, and like
Yeah.
I get some help from my agent. Like they're really aggressive with like newsletters and like contacting people directly and like sending PDFs. So it's really nice to have that help and support. But like, yeah, other than that, like I don't know, like do people do print promos? Like I have not like
I had
thought
one.
of
Yeah,
like
because
a print promo
yeah,
or
it's weird because unless you know the person, like trying to reach out to them, like, hey, well, what's your home address? Can I send you this fucking promo piece? I had a buddy
yeah.
my friend in Florida who has he's a wild dude. He was just reaching out to people like that he didn't know, and like he actually got some contacts, and he was doing print promo pieces. But I personally I haven't. It's because it's a definitely different time to do that, but I don't know. Because how's the newsletter thing work for you? That's something I haven't really done too much. I know a couple of friends of mine who do it as well. Have you found when you send those out, is it a good response? And like, what have you kind of learned in doing those, I guess?
I would say like overall it's like pretty good.
Mm,
I've tried to, I've definitely tried like different approaches. I've tried the like real long in-depth descriptions of like how you felt during like an assignment, like everything that went into it.
mm-hmm.
It's kind of this like extended caption. I think now I've moved toward like a quicker, smaller bite where it's like a grid of images that all kind of work together, some text, and then yeah, kind of get in and get out.
Yeah.
The like I don't really pay too much attention to numbers. I'm more interested in like, okay, like did somebody reply, and
Yeah.
then like did we have some sort of like conversation, or alternatively like did I send it out and then like did some type of inquiry come back through it.
Yeah.
So
All you need
that's
is
kind of how
one.
I'm like trying to track.
Uh,
Yeah, that's like what I figured. Yeah.
yeah. And to go back, man, I was just kind of curious, like, where did you grow up, and like, how do you initially kind of get into photography?
So I grew up in Shawnee, Kansas. It's a suburb of Kansas City on the
Mm,
Kansas side.
mm,
And then in terms of like getting into photography, my mom always had cameras around. She was like pretty serious like amateur photographer, like Canon AE1.
classic. I got one right here,
Was
man.
around the house. Yep. I clocked that like when you logged in.
Yeah.
Yeah, so she was like pretty present with a camera at like every event, every first day of school, Halloween costume, always had a camera, documenting myself and my dad. So that was kind of like in the background. It really wasn't until like end of high school, first couple of years of college, where I was like, oh, photography is like a thing that you could do professionally. And it
Yeah.
was through I also like grew up skateboarding as well in Kansas City. And so like, with skateboarding, you're introduced to like not only skateboarding, but also music, culture, art, indirectly. So like I think there was like a time where I was like, it would be so cool to like have like a 2-page spread in Thrasher.
Yeah.
Like that's what I was kind of like working towards like in college was like, okay, like how can I do this? And then like got bit by the photojournalism bug working for like the paper at the University of Kansas.
Oh, that's dope. Because what were you going? Were you going to school for photography, or what were you studying in college?
Oh, I was studying English,
Oh,
mainly because like I didn't really know like what to what to major in,
yeah.
and like I remember vaguely like going to like like this each school at the university had like an open house, and like the journalism school was like strange to me. It seemed like a trade school. And
Mm.
then English, like I remember, encountering like a professor that was like, oh, we're like, in addition to like British literature, like we also teach like, US Latina literature, um, and like all these other like types of authors that like I didn't know existed. So I was like, oh, I want to do this, or at least
Yeah.
I want to like put my time towards this. So I just kind of like ended up like majoring in like literature and like creative writing.
Is writing something you still enjoy doing at all, or is that kind of in the past for you? Or...
Uh, I mean, I feel like all my writing is like emails and like
Yeah.
treatments now,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
like um like that type of writing has taken on like a different like life.
Mm.
I feel like it's difficult for me to like get started, but like once I can kind of like clear all distractions and then um put myself in a place where like okay, like you can just kind of like write, then it becomes like easier, and then like it's quicker, and like I can get to like my voice and where I'm trying to go. But it like it's the thing where you sit down to do something, you're like, all right, let's do this. But first, like I am going to look up this like obscure like sample from this like song that like is in my head. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, that's such a, if you can write, it's such a skill. Like you mentioned treatments, which is like, it's become such a bigger thing in terms of like the creative process and getting jobs now. Like, and I struggle with it because when you're trying to write a treatment about some like brand or product and you're trying to convey like what you're gonna do, like I just struggle with it, man, because you want to like, at least for me, I wanted to come from a sincere place and not sound like an asshole. Like, how do you kind of approach the treatment process? Because it's something I'm trying to get better at.
I try to when I'm like first starting the treatment, I'm really trying to figure out like, okay, like am I executing somebody's vision, or am I elevating it? Like where do I fit in?
Hmm.
Um, in terms, with regard to this project. Cause like every project's kind of different.
Yep.
Like if it's like something like that's regional, then it's kind of like, okay, like I'm executing this particular thing. So like I need to focus on like, okay, I have the right crew that I work with. Like I'm technically sound with like this type of, approach in a studio. But if it's like something that's like, more global, then it's like, okay, let me talk about like my sensibilities in terms of like style. I guess a lot of it for me is like, which notes am I trying to hit? Where am I trying to emphasize, how does that align with like the goals of the project, and like what is that special thing that like I'm bringing to the whole thing.
And do you get like nitty gritty into like the technical aspects of like how you're gonna shoot it, or do you try to stay away from that? Because I know some people, they'll get down into like what gear they're gonna use and like all this type of stuff, which is like, I don't know that like an art director or whoever's really gonna give a shit, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't know.
That was, so I guess like transitioning, or I guess I don't know. I still feel that like I'm constantly like transitioning or like evolving, but like going from photojournalism to editorial to commercial, where you're working with brands and agencies, like the biggest transition is like, okay, like I'm not dealing with like quote unquote like photo people. Like I'm
Yeah.
dealing with maybe somebody who has like an art history background or like a marketing background. So I have to change the way that like I'm speaking. And like I can't tell somebody like, oh yeah, like I'm gonna like use a 35 millimeter at like 1.4 and it's gonna be layered, and like we're gonna do like a heavy vignette. You can't. Nobody should ever be shooting at 1.4 ever. You just leave that in like 09.
Yeah.
But like seriously, like it's about like, it's kind of like learning like another language. Like, and I feel like when you're in like the early process of like communicating with like, the team for the brand or the agency, on like the various threads, you'll get like kind of cues about like, okay, this might be like an area to like emphasize, or like they mentioned like these three aspects. How do I like take those and like give that to them in my voice? So like a lot of it's kind of this like decoding like language, but also figuring out how to communicate. Also, like importantly, figuring out how to communicate it in like the written word too, because like it's much easier to like. I mean, for me, it's much easier to do it like talking, and like that's why I like in-person meetings. Is like it's easier for me to do that. So like writing it and then like looking for those subtle cues is like takes some time, and like that's why I'm kind of like glad like I have the support from like an agent who'll be like, oh yeah, they mentioned like they want poppy lighting. You should mention
Yeah.
poppy lighting in like the treatment, and then you should show examples from this shoot, this shoot.
Yeah. Yeah, there's one photographer I used to assist for, a successful guy out here in Boston. He said something I'll never forget. He's like, you basically, what I do, he's like, I just listen to the creative call, and then whatever they say, I just say that back to them in a little different way. I'm like, that's perfect. It's like simple, but you're right. That's what it is. Whatever they say about their brand or product, just say it back to them. That's what it works.
Yeah, because I like you want to like convey that like you are paying attention, that like you do have some like understanding of like what their position is, and like also like, yes, I have like the goods, the evidence to like
yeah. Yeah.
to do this and to
Yeah.
like make it outstanding.
Yeah, you're invested in the project and you're invested in their brand to bring their whatever product or service and do a good job. It makes sense. And in terms of like once you got out of college, like what was kind of your first step into the photo world? Did you just kind of go straight freelance? Did you do the assisting thing that a lot of people did, or what was kind of your first step into the photo career, I guess?
So I didn't know that like you could so this is like how like I don't know, small that like my like world was, that like I like working for the Kansas City Star was like
That was a
the
dream.
thing where I was like, oh, like if I could just get like one like weekend shift, like freelancing, for the Star. Like this will be like incredible.
Mhm.
But like I took an internship sight unseen to a place called Roanoke, Virginia.
I've been there.
Um, why?
I actually did a shoot there for this company, Constant Contact, which is like a marketing company. And we went down there and shot like a whole video down in Roanoke, Virginia, randomly a couple years.
That's wild.
Yeah.
It was probably a good time too, because Roanoke is like a place that has a real special place in my heart.
Mm.
But we can go down that road another time. But so I took an internship there, thought I was going to be there for 3 months, and then I was going to do the thing where you keep interning at other papers, and then like ultimately you maybe wind up at a staff job, or you go freelance, or I don't know. I just knew that like I had 3 months, and like I was going to make the most of the 3 months, and it was a new place. Yeah, I'd never spent any time in the South. I'd never been to that part of Virginia before, so like everything was like new and exciting. And
Yeah.
also to like work with like a photo staff like at that time that was like pretty, renowned, was also exciting. So yeah, I was there for, let's see, it was 3 months, then it was 6 months, then it turned into a year, then it turned into like, okay, just work here.
Yeah.
And then I started to kind of see that like the newspaper calendar is like, it's pretty cyclical. Like if it's fall, you're shooting high school football.
Yeah.
If it's winter, you're shooting high school basketball. Summer, track, baseball. And then within that, there's like there's like the barbecue festival, the peach
Yeah.
festival, the strawberry festival, like all these things that are pretty cyclical. And occasionally like you can kind of like find your own stories and like get them in. But I kind of started to see like a ceiling in terms of like what was possible.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, as like somebody who's like from Kansas, I was like, oh, well, if I got to Virginia, like where can I go next? Like what can I do? What can I, and then like I remember getting an assignment from like the Washington Post, and I was like, wow, like
Yeah.
I don't know how they found me. Like, and then thinking that like, okay, like, this was like a nice confidence builder. Like, okay, like this is possible. Like maybe I could do this for like a larger paper. And then this is like the era, like 09, 08, when like newspapers were starting to decline.
Mm-hmm.
So then it was kind of like, okay, I should save a bunch of money and then go freelance, and
Yeah.
then like figure it out,
Because like
or
at
at
that
least like or at least like try.
Yeah, because like at that point, like looking at your work now, so much of it is like portrait based. You're doing a lot of editorial and commercial stuff. But back then, like what was the bulk of your portfolio looking like back then? Was it mostly this kind of spot news and things of that sort, or what did your kind of portfolio look like back then?
Oh gosh, my portfolio back then, um, it was like really heavy on just like documentary. I remember having a project about a town in Virginia that was like the furniture factory had closed, and it was kind of like looking at the decline of like this town and how families and individuals were coping with it. And then another project was about hip hop in Roanoke. So those two projects were the bulk. Um, yeah, I don't think they were even the bulk. I think that was my portfolio, because I had got it kind of into my head that like, okay, like you need to be like a self-starter. Like your portfolio should be, your idea. And my idea at that time was a 35 millimeter at 1.4.
No more 1.4.
Thankfully, like I've progressed, and I'm no longer, there are other lenses to use, but like, yeah, that was kind of the vibe I was at during that time.
And like, were there any photographers' work where you kind of feel like you were influenced on, like starting out? Were you even like kind of paying attention to like other people's work or looking at photo books or anything like that, starting out?
Definitely Eugene Richards, James Knockway, Alex Webb, and then I remember working part-time for a paper in Lawrence, Kansas when I was in college, and the photo editor showed me this photo by Sam Abel, renowned National Geographic photographer. It's the red bucket photo, the photo where it's the calf branding photo. I remember seeing that photo and just like, just kind of like, my mind was blown. Like, how could you fit like such a chaotic scene into one frame, have so much information, and everything is like perfectly organized and in its place, and like you can read the photo easily, exactly what's going on, you just feel like you're immersed in the frame. So like I was trying to do that at like pretty much like every chance that I got. Didn't matter like if it was a high school baseball practice or a like orchestra. Like I was like, okay, it was like down to this like recipe of like, okay, foreground, something happening in the midground, and then like contributing background, and then like just trying to like play off that approach.
Yeah, man, because like as a photojournalist, as you know, like a lot of times you just get thrown into these like boring situations, but you have to make it look interesting. I interviewed this one photographer, this dude Tom Brenner. He's like he covers like the White House.
I know Tom.
And I look at his work, man, because like for me, like you go the White House, if you're in the press room or like some boring ass like conference room or whatever, like I would just be lost. But he finds these like angles and different things, like how you're talking about. I'm like, man, I would never see that. Like, but to have that skill, like I would imagine, like spending those years working at a newspaper, do you feel like that skill has kind of helped you kind of into the newer stuff you're doing now, where it's in bigger productions and even like you're on your more kind of like editorial shoots, I guess?
Well, the thing that you mentioned that's really kind of the hallmark is that like you're thrown into different situations, and different situations, different types of people, just it runs the gamut. You could be photographing like a restaurant review in the morning, a fire in the afternoon, and then like a high school game, in the evening. And then like all those photos that you made have to be in before 8 p.m. or 9 p.m. because they have to go for like the next day's paper. So like learning how to communicate, learning how to find an image, how to make an image in less than ideal situations, and then like being able to send those back, and then also communicate like, okay, like this is like what we need to use for the B section, because like this and this happened, and like this was like the like important moment. So like communication, definitely communication skills. And then like because like the other thing with like being a newspaper staffer is that like you are kind of a one-man band. Like you're hauling lights, long lenses, like everything in the trunk of your car, which sounds crazy to me. Like I don't know, I'm like just getting kind of a flashback of like, oh, 3 assignments in one day. Like, how was I able to do that?
Yeah, that's a lot. And like, how did you how is that transitioning from like, you know, having a full-time job to like going freelance? Because, you know, I think so many people struggle with that, like where they have the dream of, you know, doing what you're doing, like shooting editorial and doing commercial stuff and like getting to work with all these different clients. Like, how is that kind of transition of like it's going out on your own and like finding work? Like, was it kind of a slow progress of getting your name out there? Like, how did it kind of work for you, the transition?
Okay, so I actually ended up like working in Roanoke as a staffer for about like 3.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
Then I left the paper and then I went interned at a photo agency
Yep.
in France,
Wow.
called Seven. It's
Oh,
the room numeral
big
seven.
agency, a big agency. Yeah.
Yeah. Because like I wanted to have an understanding of like how photos are marketed and sold.
Mm-hmm.
I also wanted like access to like the Seven archive because like like it's like a diet, like what your intake is, like what you're looking at. So if you're like looking at like good, outstanding, successful photographs daily, that's going to be your reference point.
Yeah.
And then also like the interactions between like, my boss was like the sales director for like the world except for France,
Mm-hmm.
because he couldn't speak French.
Yeah.
So being on email threads and seeing like, okay, like this is how you ask a client for more money, or this is how you shape a proposal. This is what you need to put in when you're pitching a story to this magazine. This is how you take the same pitch and repurpose it for like a business or tech magazine. And like basically let's like one big project and then like being able to like section it off into places where it would be like appropriate and make sense for them, and like they're all kind of supporting your work. That was like another skill set that I learned there. And then like, what to put in a email subject line when
Yeah.
you're asking for like an in-person meeting.
All right.
So all these like little like foundational marketing and communication skills that I didn't have, like I definitely learned in that like 6 months of working at Seven.
Mm. This is interesting. So, what did you find worked best in the email subject line when you're trying to get a meeting? Because I'll tell you what mine was, but I'm interested to hear what's worked well for you.
So it was like, and like I've done variations of this one. So it's DC photographer visiting New York,
Mm-hmm.
colon the date
Yeah.
dash meeting question mark.
Yeah.
Because I remember like my boss, like Nick Papadopoulos, like he was like, oh, you're in, he's like, you're in Paris, like you need to meet with like Le Monde, you need to meet with like Le Figaro, like all of these like news magazines. And I was kind of like, I had like the body of the email written, and then I was like, subject line, what do I do for that? So I remember like I was like, yo Nick, like what do I put for subject line? And like the idea that the subject line could be more than 3 words was like astonishing to me, and I was like, oh damn, that's possible. All right.
Yeah. Yeah. There's like an art to it,
what
man.
uh what was yours?
What I've done, well, pre-pandemic when I was still doing in-person meetings, I would just like, because a lot of times I would go to New York and I would just put the date. That was it. It would be like December 12th, because in my mind, I think, and I feel like it worked because if someone, I feel like if they got the email, they would see a date and they would be like, oh wait, do I have something on that date? Like, and they would open it because I think it's just like a psychological thing. Like they just see the date and they don't know what it is. And that's what I started doing, and I found it like the click-throughs and responses were like way better instead of being like a long thing. I don't know. That's what I've always done, and that's what's worked for me, I guess. It's funny though. Those little there's so much that goes into like a photography business, like little shit like that, the marketing and like I don't know. It's funny how much time you spend on shit like that. The shooting is just such a small aspect of actually taking pictures, you know?
Oh, 100%. That's the party. That's the celebration. Like,
Yeah.
everything else is like, trying to like put you in that place where you can just kind of like be like, like I'm free. Like I can like move around. I can like kind of just do what I want to do. Like the other stuff, it's like, okay, like I either need to convince somebody or I need to like schedule something.
Mm-hmm.
Or it's a lot of like I think that's like one of the things that I had to learn like pretty quickly is that like the amount of time you're in the field or in the studio is actually like pretty minimal. Like a lot of it's like, all right, how do I track down this person that hasn't paid me for 60 days? Or like, I need to update my website, or I need to find an assistant in, insert whatever place. Or like, it's a lot of like you said, like those like tasks that like eat up a lot of time, but they're like necessary in order to like put you in that position to succeed.
Yeah, definitely. And one thing, like you're based in DC, like did you ever feel any pressure to like move to New York or LA? Like so many photographers, like I know the kids I went to school with, like so many of them moved to New York or LA. Did you ever feel that pressure like to go to a bigger market?
So when I was like first starting out, I remember going to meet with Marcel Saba from Redux Pictures.
Yep.
And Marcel was like very like kind to me in like the early stages of my career. Still is. He still returns my emails. Nice. But I think I was like, telling him, was like, yeah, I'm gonna leave like the newspaper that I'm at, and I'm thinking about moving to a bigger market because like Roanoke, like it's difficult to like explain to people where it is and what's around it, like the likelihood that there would be, regular work, doesn't seem like possible. And I think he was like, oh, where do you want to move? And I was like, it was just like kind of like throwing out cities. And he goes, yeah, you don't want to move to New York. Don't move to New York. He's like, I'll tell you why. He's like, you're not going to be able to like, he's like, if you're trying to do long form documentary work or any type of personal work, all you're going to be doing is like spending your time figuring out like how you're going to pay your rent, and you're not going to be making any work. So I was like, yeah, definitely don't want to be doing that. And then I remember, I think like a friend like told me what their like rent was in New York, and I was just like, ooh, no okay, thanks. Yeah, let me just stay in like Roanoke for a little longer and like, get stuck, on these projects and then kind of figure out what the next move is.
Yeah, I mean DC, like there's so many good clients there. You guys have Nat Geo, you got AARP, you got there's like some other badass magazines are down, like Smithsonian magazines. So there's like a lot of good clients in that area, and it's like yeah, I don't know. I personally, I never felt the pressure to go to New York, and I never wanted to. It's fun to visit, but it's too chaotic, and like I don't know. Even just like I did a shoot in New York like a month ago, and just the logistics of like shooting in New York, like on location, is a fucking hassle, dude. Because there's just so much shit going on. It's wild. And in terms of like your portrait work, I'm always just curious, like how do you approach portrait shoots? Do you have like a process of like how you like to prepare, or like how do you approach that type of work?
That's a good question.
Like you did a
I
shoot
like to
with
do a lot of
Nancy Pelosi. I was kind of like, how do you approach a shoot like that with like such a big person, big personality? Like, how did you kind of prepare for that shoot? I guess.
is this the one where she's
She's
like
like,
in a pink pantsuit
yeah, she's like
and
leaning
like
up
kind
against a
of
desk.
yeah, okay. So with any of these like um individuals of note, like I like to do a lot of research. So like I will look at their Twitter feed, I'll look at their Instagram, I'll look at um YouTube video clips. I want to see how their face moves, like what their voice sounds like, what their body is doing,
Yeah.
um, where if it's like a controlled situation, like what is the space they're being put into? Like, what's that look like? Because that will kind of like inform me in terms of like, okay, are they going to try to stick me in this place? Do I need to ask for like a different room? Do we need to bring a seamless? What questions do I need to ask? Their team beforehand, so like we can, put ourselves in a position to like make something unique, or at least attempt to try to make something unique. So it's a lot of that type of research, a lot of like asking questions like on the front end. And then my lighting is like pretty, like I'm not really reinventing the wheel with lighting.
Yeah.
So like that's like not something that I'm like really trying to think too hard about. Like, I want to make sure it's dialed in, but like I'm more interested in like, okay, like how do I reassure this person that this is going to be like a like pleasant experience? Is there something that we can connect on, kind of human to human? So like Nancy Pelosi is like a big San Francisco Giants fan. So if you go into her office, she has like all of this like Giants gear, like bats, like there's a ball. I'm blanking on who like autographed the ball. It might have been like from like the World Series like a couple of years ago, like the entire team or maybe the manager.
Damn.
But like, so my dad's side of the family, they're all from Northern California. So grandfather's a huge Giants fan. So like indirectly I've paid attention to the Giants. So I was like, all right, well, let's talk about baseball. So like we're doing that. So like that's my way of like trying to connect, trying to like, I want you to view me kind of as a human, not just like a person who's rolling in with like a camera and like it's going to be like really clinical. Like I want it to be exciting, comfortable. So it's a lot of talking, a lot of like, okay, would you normally be in this space? Okay, like where would your body be? Like a lot of like those questions to try to like get the individual comfortable, get them in a comfortable place, in a place where like they feel safe. Because I feel like when people are being photographed, especially like a portrait, like they want to feel safe, they want to feel reassured.
No, definitely. And being in DC, like you've had the opportunity to photograph like a handful of politicians and different like government like workers. Like I saw you photograph James Comey. Is photographing politicians in that kind of world something you enjoy, or like how do you approach that? Because politics is it's a crazy world out there.
Yeah. This is like kind of like the like the fun thing about like photography is that like you occasionally get opportunities to interact with like people that like you normally wouldn't get a chance to meet. So and that's like exciting to me. Like the idea that like the New York Times or Business Week would be like, hey, like we have some time with like James Comey, like, is this something you might be interested in and available? And I'm like, yeah, absolutely make this happen. And then it's like, and then it goes from that to like, okay, like how do we make like an interesting photograph of like Comey, who's been photographed, by, all sorts of people. How do we do that with like Pelosi? Or how do we do that with like, insert, whomever? And so like, then that challenge becomes like even more interesting. It's like, okay, like how do I bring my voice to this? How do I like, get what like, it's that balancing act of like, okay, how do you make what like the client, needs? But then how do you just kind of like, I don't know. I was watching like NFL films, and like there was like a part where like I think it was like Drew Bledsoe's talking to Tom Brady, and he's like, "Oh fuck it, man, just be a gunslinger." And like I often like I often think about like that idea where like you're kind of like moving through the portrait, and you've done like the seamless, you've done this kind of like half environmental, but there's like a clean space where their head is, and there might be like an area where you can put type, and then you're like, all right, like we still got time, and like people seem to be like, things seem to be going well. Like, all right, how do we push it a little bit more? How do we make something that's like unexpected? And that's like the place that I try to get to with these types of like situations. I don't know why I like that, but that's always in my head. It's like, oh, just fuck it, just be a gunslinger.
Yeah, man. That's it. That's if anything from this interview, Jared is a gunslinger, man. That's what I'm gunslinger Jared, man. I like it. How was it? What was your experience photographing Comey? Because I mean, obviously, I'm sure when you photographed him, that's when he was in the headlines of the news when everything was going on. Like, what was your experience photographing him? Obviously, isn't that dude like 6'7"? He's like a massive dude, right?
Yeah. Okay. So the first time I photographed him was when he was in the news. This was for Business Week, and I think I got like 90 seconds with him.
Yeah.
So everything was like really, I think we had like 3 different like setups, and just had him like kind of like walk through.
Damn.
And like tried to hold his attention as much as possible, because I knew that like the writer, they were still going to like interview him, and they wanted like, it's a thing where it's like words have priority over photos, so like they wanted like as much of the interview time as possible, and didn't want like the photography to cut into it.
Yep.
So that time, like I had like pretty minimal interaction with him. The second time I photographed him was for the New York Times, and it was when it was for like a preview of when I can't remember if it was like the limited series where like Jeff Daniels plays Comey.
Oh yeah.
So it was like kind of leading up to that. So this is maybe summertime, late summertime in 2020. And I remember like thinking that like, okay, like I'm gonna have to like be on a thread with like his publisher, his like his entire team. And then I remember it rained the day we were supposed to like do the shoot, and he was like, I get an email, it's like an interesting email, and like the person's screen name is like something else.
Yeah.
And he was like, hey, Jim Comey here. Looks like we got rain today. Like, you want to try this for tomorrow? And it was like, meet me at it's like this, it's the most random monument in DC. And I was just like, oh, all right, that's kind of odd. Okay. But it's outdoors, we're safe, we're he was amenable to like a specific time, because I wanted to like not do it in the middle of the day, and I didn't want to do it early in the morning. So he was like cool with like meeting like late afternoon, so we'd get like pretty decent light. And he's actually hilarious.
Really?
Like, yeah, he's like pretty easygoing, and like I remember he walked up and like he tried to like kind of sneak up, but like he's 6'8", 6'9", like you can't, there's no sneaking around. And like he's also in a suit.
Yeah.
And like I remember, like, this is like, pretty deep pandemic, and I was like, oh, like, surprise, the thing where like you see another human and you're like, oh, like, you're wearing pants today.
Yeah.
And like I rolled in shorts, but like I was trying to like do the thing where you dress it up and you have like a nicer button down, but you're still wearing shorts.
Business.
Which like he thought was hilarious.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, I'm only in a suit because like my wife was like, you're going to be in the New York Times, you need to wear a suit. So it was just kind of like jokes back and forth during the whole time. And so like, yeah, a lot of it was just like, oh, what was the weird thing that you picked up, during quarantine, or like, that stuff. And I'm like, I remember he told me that like he had taught himself how to play the piano.
Yeah.
Which was like, you hear that and you're kind of like, oh, damn, that's awesome. And like the interaction and like that conversation, that exchange is as equally exciting as like, the photograph that comes with it. Like oftentimes, like I'll talk to like other friends who are photographers, and I'll be like, they'll ask like, oh, well, how did your thing with insert whatever magazine go? I'm like, oh, I mean, good, but I think like it's one of those scenarios where like the conversation is going to be like way better than the photograph.
Oh yeah, definitely, man. That's I have the reason being a photographer. That's the coolest thing. Like I always just say, like photography, gives you an excuse to have cool experiences. Like gives you an excuse to like reach out to people that you would never do otherwise. Be it a personal project, and then obviously with the assignment stuff, like getting this fucking spend a day with like a dude who ran the FBI. Like it's fucking crazy. Like it's it's an interesting career path, man. Another thing I was interested in talking to you about, like I know you're with Red Eye Reps. I was kind of curious, like what was kind of your process of like partnering with them? Like what made you want to kind of partner with a rep, and like how's it kind of your experience been having a rep for your career, I guess, been?
So I think I started getting inquiries that started to be like larger productions, with brands, with like nonprofits, with organizations, and like I didn't really know what was going on. I was just kind of like, kind of approaching it the same way that I would an editorial assignment. So I was like thinking like, okay, like they want, this type of shoot. So like, I'm just going to take like what I would do for an editorial shoot and apply that to, what this organization wants.
Yep.
And I remember like, like going online to like Wonderful Machine or like, other like resources and just being like, oh, wow, you can charge that much.
Yep.
For like, something that is like fairly straightforward. Yeah. And that kind of like blew my mind. And like, I didn't know like that language of business was something that like I was not familiar with, like in 2017, 2016, like the various types of usage, like how, you get numbers to align, and like how you have like in all these expenses and fees, and like you're accounting for, all of the money in order to like get you to a place where like it's worthwhile to do.
Yeah.
So I think a friend of mine had told me that like, yeah, like reps will work freelance for you. You just kind of have to find like
Yep.
a rep that is available, and then also like interested and like it's going to be worth their time. So every time that I would get like an inquiry, like I would, on my like short list of like reps, I would like just hit them up and be like, hey, like, do you have like time, to take this on? This is all the info that I have so far. Is it like going to be a good fit for you? Do you have time? And there was one other rep that I was like working with that like was doing this, and they were super nice. So that's how like I started like building that relationship with like Red Eye, and just like with reps in general. Was like, I don't know the language of business, like, and like I don't know how, like, it just kind of like boggled my mind. I was like, okay, like how am I supposed to like reply to all these emails so quickly? How am I supposed to put all this together? But then I also have like two other editorial. How do I balance like my business with like the creative, with like production, pre-production? Like, how do I do all these things at once? Like, I need some sort of like, I need support. I need like help.
Yeah.
So that's where like the idea of like reaching out to a rep was. And then it was like, okay, like, who fits like personality wise, who has my best interests, like, do I fit on the roster? Like all of those other questions, like, I started to pop up more like the deeper I got with it.
And like, what do you feel like the main thing, like having a rep, like what are you hoping they bring to the table for you? And like, what do you think are like the main things you're kind of leaning on them for? Is it mostly this kind of like negotiating the money and putting the estimates together, or is it more helping you with marketing, or like what are kind of the main things that you're looking for from your rep, you think?
That's a good question. So I think like first and foremost, just kind of like just general support. Like, they do put all my estimates together. They help with like licensing. They're handling like all that type of communication, so I can like focus on creative and like focus on like the first draft of like a treatment if that's necessary. Or if I need to like just pull like a general PDF. Also, it's nice to go on a creative call with your rep. You kind of feel like you've got somebody in your corner. Because you can be on a call and there's like 7 or 8 people, and like it can be intimidating. So having somebody there alongside with you who's remembering to ask like really important questions and questions that you would not have thought of. So there's that aspect of it. The marketing aspect, they do their thing, and I kind of look at it as an extension of like what I'm doing. And it's just nice to be able to just fire off an email and be like, hey, is this working? Like, does this like photograph, or does this set of photographs, like, is it working? And then like getting kind of like direct and honest feedback of like, this, maybe don't include this, like, think about this, push more in this area. So, and like how it is like working independently, like, you don't always get feedback. So like having somebody that like I can just like reach out to informally and be like, hey, like, what do you think? Like, is this working? Is this not working? And then also like kind of like leading up to like next year, like, we'll talk about goal setting. We'll talk about like, to kind of bring it back to that test shoot, like, how do we take the test shoot and like, how do we push it, even more? Like, does it make sense to do something that accompanies that? Is there a motion aspect that can be explored? Like, what's possible? And like having, two additional people that I trust and enjoy being around and like feel like they have like my best interests, like being able to kind of just like riff on that is, it's like, it's really nice. And like, I'm feel very fortunate to like have that right now in my career.
No, that's great, man. Yeah, I know it's hard finding someone that you align with personality wise and has the same like creative vision for what you want to do. So that's great. And it's a sick roster. I know my buddy Ryan Young's over there. I think
Yeah.
he's a great dude. He's killing it. And then I think Chris Buck is on there now too. I think he recently just signed with Red Eye too, which is pretty badass. So definitely a lot of talent over there for sure. And you touched on one thing, like when you're starting out, like you go from editorial to commercial, you don't know what you can charge for. You don't realize you can charge for, digital workstation, your laptop. You can charge for all these pre-production things, and it's a tough thing to navigate. And I think within the last year, you kind of started I guess you'd call it like a nonprofit, this kind of organization called Fuck Gatekeeping, which is, I believe, to kind of help like the younger generation, to kind of get informed of like about the business and stuff. Like, maybe you could tell us a little bit about that organization you started.
So Fuck Gatekeeping was founded by myself and Chan, also fellow Red Eye photographer,
Mm-hmm.
and Emiliano Granado. So during the pandemic and during shortly after like George Floyd, there was like a lot of talk in the industry of like how do we level the playing field? And I think myself and like a number of photographers were offering like portfolio reviews over like Google Hangout and like Zoom, and just kind of like being available to like answer questions. Cause like I remember having a lot of people, reaching out on behalf of like somebody else saying like, oh, hey, like this brand hit me up. Do these numbers sound good?
Yeah.
And then I would be like, no, those numbers do not sound good.
Yeah.
Also, that contract is like super predatory. Like, like tell them to like go back and like do this, and this. Also, like they can reach out to reps on a freelance basis. Reps going to take a cut, but like the terms and like money might be more favorable. So like, don't feel like you have to say yes to the first offer, especially one that's like really overreaching. So Carmen was doing that as well. Emiliano was doing that. Carmen and I were having conversations about, the topic of like access. And I would say like Carmen was like the one who kind of led everything. And then Emiliano and I, we're on the same page, and we have like a website, but like in an Instagram, but we don't really post to Instagram.
Yeah.
And occasionally we'll get questions. We get a lot of questions. A lot of them are like very specific licensing questions. And like, we just can't answer because like we either don't have all of the info or the timing, but like the questions that are a bit more broad, we're able to answer. Like, kind of like how you said, like, when you're beginning your journey with commercial photography, like, you don't know what like a camera kit fee is.
Yeah.
You don't know that you can bill for retouching or like any of this stuff. So like just giving people kind of like these like foundational elements, and then also letting them know that like you can ask questions, like it's totally fine.
Yeah. No, that's amazing, man. Yeah, because I mean, I get some of those emails too with the podcast and like stuff that like I is a second nature to me, but like you realize like people are just starting out, like they don't know even know who to contact. Like if I want to shoot for ESPN, like I remember when I started, you're lost. Like how do I even like get on their radar? Who do I contact? Like what is a photo editor? Just these basic questions, and it's like you kind of learn like as you go, but that's pretty amazing. You guys kind of built this kind of organization, and is something you guys are going to kind of continue working on in the new year with fuck gatekeeping?
Yeah, definitely. Like, I mean, like we're still fielding questions, um, and like the website is updated like pretty infrequently.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know that we'd like to do something in person, but like
Tough.
because of like you know COVID and like it's just not possible.
Yeah.
But I know that we want to do um, both kind of like informal like gatherings, but then also like maybe something that's a little bit bigger. But like the whole idea is like um one to like kind of like not to like dumb it down, but like to be a cheerleader. Like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like again, being like working independently, like is fucking amazing. But
Yep.
it's also like pretty daunting because like it's like you're driving through the rain and it's like heavy fog.
Yeah.
You just got to put like your headlights on and you just kind of just go 10 and 2,
Yeah.
just like 45, and you just
Yeah.
keep going straight and you're
Yeah.
going to be fine. But nobody is there to kind of like cheer you on and like reassure you. So
Mm-hmm.
like I feel like just as much as like fuck gatekeeping is there to tell you to politely push back
Mm-hmm.
on like a predatory contract,
Mm-hmm.
or like, hey, these are some examples of treatments, or hey, this is like what worked for us, in our careers. It might not work for you, but you can take some of it and apply it to your journey. It's also to just be like, hey, you can do this. You
Yeah.
got it. And like letting somebody know that like, hey man, I'm from the middle of like nowhere in Kansas. Nobody in my family has any relationship to big media or like any brand. Like I don't have an uncle
Mm-hmm.
who founded an ad agency. Like none of that. Like if I can do this, like you can do this.
Yeah.
Like, and I'm just there to like, pat on the back. I'm the guy at the end of the bench with the towel. Like
No,
I'm
man,
that guy.
you're the gunslinger, man. Remember, you're the gunslinger. No, it's smart, dude. Like, I mean, the more you share knowledge with people, like I think the photo industry as a whole will be better. You know, less people will hopefully get screwed over on contracts, and people will charge more and make more money, hopefully. And I think that's in the grand scheme of things, it's better to help out everybody, because I think the old school way was like people didn't share information. They didn't like it was more of a closed off thing back in the day. But I'm definitely mad respect for you guys starting that and helping the next generation.
Yeah, and I'm hoping that like it just becomes a thing where like they do it for like the next person. Like that's something like I always like tell like somebody that like I've given advice to or like helped or hired. They're like, oh man, like how can I like I'm gonna take you out for beers. I'm just like, I'd love that, but like just do it for the next person. Like
Yeah, yeah,
somebody else, you're gonna be in a position where like you can help somebody, or you can open a door or help somebody walk through it. Like just do it for the next person, and like you'll be better, they'll be better. Like it's just good for everybody.
yeah, definitely. And I guess to wrap up, man, last question. Like we're going into the new year here. Anything you're hoping to work on in the new year? Kind of any goals or anything like that for 2022?
Goals for 2022. I want to build on that like test shoot. So more collaborations with stylists, with makeup artists, prop stylists, retouchers, specifically Lena.
Mm-hmm.
So just kind of like more of that, and like trying to find ways to like push my work in that direction. Also like I've got like a personal project, various personal projects. So trying to finish one of them.
Yeah.
Um, and then and then just kind of like the usual, like update the website, make sure my taxes are paid
Oh, dude, yeah, that's
on
what
time.
I'm working on right now, dude. I'm trying to just get it all organized right now because I know it's all coming soon.
Yeah,
um,
I'm just like waiting for like the barrage of like tax documents that like are gonna hit me in like 2 weeks.
yeah, for real. Well, anyways, Jared, man, I'm glad we connected, and thanks so much for doing this. And for people listening, if they want to check out more of your work, where's the best place for them to go?
Instagram.com/Jared Soares.
Mm,
Um, JaredSoares.com on the internet, if people are
nice.
still going to websites. Yeah,
Cool.
that's those are the only two places that I'm active.
Cool, man. Well, I'll link it and people can go check it out. But thanks so much.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me. This is great.
So there you have it. That was the Jared Soares interview. Just want to thank Jared so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. It's a real pleasure talking to him about his journey with photography. He's definitely accomplished a lot, from working as a newspaper photographer and then transitioned to working freelance on commercial and editorial for top clients. Really appreciate hearing his story. So can't thank him enough. Definitely go check out Jared's work. I'll put the links in the descriptions, but his website is jaredsoares.com, as well as on Instagram. You can definitely go follow him at Jared Soares. He's always posting up new work and different projects he's working on, so definitely go give him a follow. And as always, I'll be posting new episodes every month. You can check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and the Photo Banter YouTube page if you want to watch the video version. And as always, thanks so much for listening, and take care.